I'll keep this short. Truefire sponsored this channel, and at the moment, for Black Friday, they're running their all access at an incredible discounted price of $79 for a full year of access to every single course. Go check it out. Okay, I've not got a ton of stuff like Black Friday based. You know, I think you're going to be overwhelmed by quite a lot of this sort of stuff, but the reason that I felt like this was a good kind of company to work with was because this is a company that you told me about. So Scuffham S Gear, I can first remember hearing about a few years ago where I'd be kind of, you know, messing around with this modelling stuff. I started getting into plugins a bit more, and then people in the comments were like, you should check out Scuffham S Gear. Scuffham S Gear actually came out in 2011. I'm going to show you some tones in this video. I'm going to kind of walk you through some of what you can do with S Gear. It looks fairly minimal in terms of what's actually involved there, but I think that's kind of one of its strong suits. It's a very versatile plugin, and it's actually created by the guy who came up with the Marshall JMP1. I think it's super fascinating that Mike went from the physical world of making Marshall amplifiers into plugins. It's a plugin that is, you know, revered by pros, and I think actually it sounds so good. I dropped it into, I was playing around with some cheaper modelers and just experimenting with some stuff. At the moment, S Gear is on a Black Friday sale, I think for $89. So that's why myself and Mike got together to make this video. But you know, I plugged into S Gear after trying these other bits and pieces. I'm just like, well, this is just a lot better. So I would say if you're looking for a plugin that can do a good range of stuff, not super focused on the heavy side of things, then this is a really good one from a guy who knows and loves amplifiers, has made them, and is really passionate about it. So Mike and S Gear, the story goes that Mike designed the JMP1 MIDI preamp in 1992. I've seen these things. These are kind of a legendary piece of equipment, and it's interesting and innovative work within the tube amp world. Like it even still to this day, something like the Synergy preamps probably, you know, look kind of similar to that sort of thing, right? Where it's kind of, that's innovation. Even 1992, I was 3 years old. He also came up with worked on various other projects at Marshall, including the JFX1 rack multi-effects. He worked there from 1990 to 96. Strong reputation amongst professional users and popular with music producers, and S Gear is often used on records, film, TV, game, music productions. For example, and this is why I recently did a video on S Gear, where Dann Huff had talked about actually using it, and I was like, that's interesting. So Dann Huff is one of those preeminent users. Scott Sharrod from Little Feat, Jonathan Martin Berry from The Weeknd, and several other name players that have and use the software, but he doesn't have permission to use their names. It first launched in 2011, and since then there's been, you know, like a steady evolution, but it's not like this sort of thing where it's like a whole avalanche of new stuff to check out. It's just gradual evolution, and I think the key thing for me is that its starting point is like really great tone as a starting point. Yeah, this is something that he said, well, maybe we talk about this at some other stage, but between 2015 and 2018, he worked with Eddie Van Halen on some software amp stuff. That's kind of the resume. Now, I asked Mike as well what his favourite amp is within S Gear, and he said probably the Duke is my favourite because of its simplicity. There are certain Fender Blackface edge of breakup sounds that to me make the electric guitar complete, like a real instrument. Myself, personally as well, I love the sound of like a Fender Deluxe Reverb, personally as well. So me and Mike have that in common. Deeply dynamic and responsive, beautiful or ugly depending on how you play. Particularly the Super Reverb and Deluxe Reverb have certain settings where they're just perfect. I wanted to get that vibe in a simple package with the Duke, and I was pretty close. So the Duke is like your Fender Blackface type thing, right? The Duke, Steeler and Jackal were the first 3 amps in S Gear, then later came the Wayfarer and Custom 57. The Jackal is often overlooked, but has some really nice bluesy jazzy sounds and can be very dynamic. With the Wayfarer, I introduced a better way of controlling the power amp sensitivity and introduced the amp drive control. By balancing the input gain and the amp drive, you can really control the amount and character of power amp distortion. So I really like that about the Wayfarer, and probably should revisit my Duke design to give it that same control. Obviously, the Wayfarer is the most sophisticated and flexible of all the amps. It is very much based on a Boogie Mark series amp, but the initial preamp stages are truer to original Fender designs. I used to gig with a Boogie Mark amp, similar to me actually, I gigged with a Boogie for years. I said, what's it like going from physical to digital, and do you have like any opinions on that stuff? He said, I don't really think that one is better than the other. To me, they are just different approaches. Playing a real amp at appropriate volume is a very physical with a direct acoustical link between the guitar and speaker. I think there is something very musical about that, in that you have to play with conviction. And this is a really key point that is something that if you look through my presets, you might notice that I've used the same cab on this. I've always found that the combination of amp and speaker is essential. Combo amps are designed around a particular speaker and cabinet, and if you change that, the design might fail. Whilst working on the JMP1 at Marshall, I would only ever play it through a 9005 50-watt power amp and a slanted 4x12 with vintage 30s. Any other combination I couldn't work with. Of course it might sound fine with other combinations, but I needed to have a fixed benchmark for the design. Getting to my point, I think in the digital world you have a lot of options to play with, and you can't expect everything to sound magical when you're switching cabs, etc. But sometimes you'll find wonderful combinations. You have to have some patience, know what you want, and spend time finding what works for your playing. Or, you know, go through factory presets. One of the key points, and what I've done with some of the presets here, is use the same core cabs that I was happy with. If you don't need to change everything to get a new sort of tone, don't break what isn't, don't try to fix what isn't broken. If it works, if you've got a cab sound that works for you, if it works with your Fender style amp, switch over and see what happens if you put a Marshall style amp through it, and kind of see what that sounds like. And that is what I found with the S Gear stuff, is that I can switch those amps around. I tend to leave those cabs pretty much set how I set them on day one. There's loads and loads and loads of factory presets. There's banks. There's also presets for like every effect. And although it looks like we're kind of sparse in terms of effects, you've got reverb, delay, modulation, a wah, compressor, and a drive. And I think there's enough in there that you can do some really interesting stuff. Okay, I'm sat in front of my monitor here, so this might be slightly noisy. Now, you've of course got a bunch of, just click presets so you'll see them, factory presets. You can create your own banks, so factory is down here, so you've got loads. Now, you might want to keep hold of a bunch of these, because they do, you know, if we just click through some. For example, that's with the Wayfarer there. It can do many, many sounds like them as a Boogie amp. You've got so much tweakability in there. If you stay off of the lead channels at its core, it's kind of more Fendery. So yeah, Wayfarer scooped. You know, there's loads and loads and loads of stuff. If you want plexi sounds. Okay, so just as a starting point, you might want to check those out. In my own bank here, I'm using a compressor up here. Other effects, you've got drive and a wah. I won't demo them because you know what a wah-wah sounds like. Drive, get rid of that. But so we've got compressor. I've not got the gate on. Have I got the gate on? On. So you might want to use the gate there. So you see compressor into the amp. The amps, like real amps, are gonna, you know, require you to sort of find what they do for you. Okay, then also this little input here is an important thing to set as you like. I've got my gain all the way down on the interface. You might want to do something different to that. Up to you. But since we're not based on totally real world things, you don't necessarily need to be thinking so much about accuracy and think more about, well, does it sound like what it sounds like? So you've got a whole bunch of these, and if you go here, you can change. Okay, and we can also then introduce cab delay if we wanted to get more stereo. Okay, then we've got delay, and probably what I'll show you here is that there's loads and loads. Let me just remove this one here. You're short, medium or long. Feedback, you know what that does. Mix, you know what that does. But yeah, you've got all of these sort of different settings. Circular delay, so lexicon based. So we add another one then, and you would have factory presets after delay 1. So this was after 1, yeah, and then this one after amp. If you wanted to do the 80s thing, you definitely can. Mod thing, for example. Again, make use of these presets. And like I say, so for me, for example, using the Wayfarer, I tended to keep these roughly the same. You've got like room thing, you can do plates in here, you can do all sorts of great stuff in here. So I'm going to turn off some of this stuff up top. So it's called the Wayfarer here, more of a Fender-y based, but with a trem built in, harmonic trem if you want, which is lovely. Or it could be more of your kind of if you want those Mezza Boogie type tones, that's your place to go. I really like the Duke as well, which is kind of more Fender-y. boost. Kind of got you clean. That sort of sweet spotty Fender type thing, right? You can have 2 amps, so you could switch between 2 settings like that. I don't use that a ton, but it's worth thinking about. For example here. Okay, then tweed is just gorgeous. Possible to show you everything in this video, but I think that gives you some sort of sense about what's possible in here. We've got spring reverbs. You know, if you've got more expensive reverb taste, bypass the effects quickly. So yeah, I think it's got loads and loads and loads of great stuff in there, worth checking out for sure. $89 at the moment, Black Friday. And this is the crucial point, again, that I'll end with. I think it's one of the best, if not the best sounding plugins that I've tried. And I put it up against some of these other modelers and bits and pieces that I was making a video with. And it's just like, well, that sounds better, or more like what I want at least. Reasons why this might sound better than some other stuff: the oversampling is fixed at 8 times, and what that means is that as you introduce more gain, because it's oversampling by 8 times, that's going to have less aliasing happening essentially. So this is one thing that cheaper modelers might not do, or cheaper plugins, or some other plugins, just for whatever reason. If you oversample at a higher rate, then you're going to get less aliasing, and overall a slightly more natural and less fatiguing sound. But anyway, let me know your thoughts. S Gear, you guys told me about it in the first place, so hopefully sharing some of the love in that way. I've done a bunch of videos with Scuffham in the past, Scuffham S Gear, that were never sponsored. This is my first one that's ever been sponsored by them, so I'm grateful for that. But as I say, that Black Friday, $89 for a plugin that I think has some really, really, really good sound, particularly if you're looking for clean edge of breakup and like smooth leads, you know, Marshally stuff, Fendery stuff, classic stuff. I think you might dig it.